Hello, welcome to Genealogy Coffee Break, brought to you by us, the librarians at the Center for Jewish History. My name is Ty Marks, and I'm here with my fellow librarians and colleagues from the Digital, Processing, and Conservation Lab to show you how to digitize your family photos and documents from home. During today's episode, please feel free to send us questions in the comment section so that we can answer them live. If we do not get to your question, or if you are not watching live, you can email your question to inquiries@cjh.org. If you or anyone you know may be interested in watching this program, please share it with them. And you can access previous episodes of Genealogy Coffee Break by going to the video section of the Center for Jewish History's Facebook page or www.cjh.org/genealogy coffee break. Did you know we offer free Zoom workshops for Jewish and non-Jewish community groups? Topics range from Jewish and non-Jewish genealogy research to preserving family photos and documents. If you or someone you know or group you know are interested in scheduling a Zoom workshop, please contact us at gi@cjh.org. We also offer one-on-one virtual reference meetings to assist with in-depth or complex genealogy and collections-based research questions. Who will find this program worthwhile? This series is intended for a general audience. Beginners or advanced researchers are welcome. You do not need to be Jewish to find our research tips useful, and we focus on free online resources that can be used from home. You can also suggest a topic. Okay, so for digitizing your family photos and documents at home, we're going to focus on 3 key understandings to make this process as seamless and successful and worth it as possible. Those 3 understandings are organizing, digitizing, and preserving. So the key to creating a seamless digitization workflow is organizing the physical material beforehand. Organizing your material before digitizing can reduce frustrations created from surprise preservation issues and the amount of time spent prepping material while you digitize. And it will make it easier to keep track of and organize the digitized material. But I want to emphasize this point because while digitizing everything and organizing it later on is an option, especially if it pertains to a very small collection, when it comes to larger quantities of material, such as 100 or 200 onward photos, scanning, then organizing the material, and staring at a screen to do so, it can become very frustrating, very time consuming, and it can give you a big headache. My approach or my thought process on organizing the physical collection before digitizing it is think of a jigsaw puzzle. Physically sorting the material is often easier because you can easily visualize and label the groupings. You can visualize where everything is, and you can very easily visualize and physically place where it should go. This is also a great opportunity to rehouse your physical collection. So step 1, Workspace and Tools. Set up a clean workspace. If you can, choose a spot that will not be disturbed and will allow you to organize your material without the risk of other items getting mixed in. Make sure that the surface is clear of clutter. Wipe down the surface and be sure that it is completely dry when you begin your project. You do not want to accidentally get cleaning supplies or water on your material. Then gather any necessary tools that will assist you with handling and examining the material. This will depend on the nature and the condition of the material you're working on. This could mean ensuring you have sufficient lighting to see what you're handling, or a magnifying glass to see the writing on the back of a photo, or to make out handwriting in documents, and powder-free nitrile gloves to handle photos or fragile documents. Step 2 in organizing is preparing the physical material. It's important that you work on one section of material at a time and work on a manageable section of material at a time. This will help keep sections you've already worked on in order and prevent unfortunate accidents such as stacks of material falling over or being knocked over, and it can prevent different sections of your material from mixing together. It will also make the task less daunting and will allow you to better plan how much time you allocate to the project each day. As you work on this, I suggest that you follow some steps from preserving your family photos and documents. Part of preparing your collection for digitization will include taking stock of any preservation concerns. For example, if you plan on using a scanner to digitize your material, note any documents that are torn or brittle, or any scrapbooks with cracked bindings, and pages that cannot be removed, as they should not be placed on a scanner. Placing these items on a scanner can cause further irreparable damage. If you want to risk creating a digitized image with these fragile materials, remember that you could end up with a bad scan and material that cannot be digitized a second time. If it will not damage your material, remove any staples, paper clips, rubber bands, and photos from albums to make the process of staging your photo or placing items on the scanner seamless. If you cannot remove these items without causing further damage, it would be best to digitize the material with a camera or phone or tablet rather than a scanner. Or you can use some preservation or conservation services to help you with that. As you scan your items, handle the photos by the edges to help prevent smudging, fingerprints, and other damage. Do not flatten extremely curled photos. As my colleague Sarah stated in the Preserving Your Family Photos and Documents episode, documents that have been stored or rolled or folded for a long period of time will suffer much greater damage if unrolled or unfolded. If you absolutely must have the photo digitized, take it to a conservator, as they have the training and the tools to deal with such issues. Step 3 in organizing is sorting. Determine the order. This can be as is, or by year, location, or some other designation that is meaningful to you, such as holidays or countries. At the beginning of this section, I mentioned that organizing your physical collection before digitizing it will make it easier to keep track of and organize the digitized material. This is because the order of the digitized material should reflect the order of the physical material. When it comes time to name the documents, and we'll talk more about that later on, when it comes time to name the documents, photos, and the folders they will be grouped in, you can refer back to your physical collection to make sure your items are grouped together properly and to ensure that you name your material properly. I put this step last because deciding the order of the material is often best made after you get a feel for what's in your collection. For example, let's say I decide to preemptively organize a stack of 100 photos by holiday. After sorting my photos by holiday, it turns out that 10 of those 100 depicted holidays, and the rest are dated photos that span 3 years. With this discovery, I now have to resort my photos into groupings that make more sense, in this case, chronological order. To avoid this frustration, see what groupings come together instead of forcing groups of material together. It will save you time, frustration, and headache. As you work, document. Keep track of what's in your collection. This is one of the most helpful tips I can give you. When we discussed sorting, we went over how much easier it is to organize digitized material when the physical material is organized first. Taking notes makes this even easier because you won't have to try to remember the names of your groupings or the information in the image or document. You can do so by creating an Excel file or a Word doc, or even take notes by hand. Whatever works for you, as long as your notes will be easy for you to access and understand later on. Try to avoid obscure names and stick to simple information that succinctly states what the grouping and the item is. Then, during the digitization process, when it's time to create folder names and names for individual items, you'll have the information ready and can breeze through the process. And before going on, the information you'll want to document is the who, what, when, where, why, and how if it's applicable. Which pile is which, who's in the photo, where was the photo taken, is there anything written on the back, who created the document, who was the recipient of a letter that you have. Now on to the actual digitizing of the material. With your physical material organized, it is time to move on to the actual digitization of your material. In this section, we'll go over the tools and setup you'll need, along with what to do with everything and why. I also want to preface this section by stating that, excuse me, I'll be focusing on creating master files, or the original file from which copies are made. We'll focus on these because master files won't suffer the same level of digital degradation that other file types will when copies are made. More on this in a moment. What you'll need. You don't need an extravagant or expensive setup to safely and efficiently digitize your material. As you can see from some of the previous photos in this slide where items are on a table, this is actually my personal setup at home. Nothing extravagant, just some lamps I had lying around and an old clean card table. So you'll need your workspace, something to capture the image, good consistent lighting, and your photos and documents. And near the end of this section, I'll talk about some helpful but not necessary extras. So your workspace. As with your initial setup to organize your physical collection, make sure your workspace is clean, free of clutter, and won't be disturbed. Your workspace should be clear of tripping and toppling hazards. Make sure that the section you're working on is nearby, but not on the floor. Secure any cords or wires. Do not have the material piled high or high up on the shelf. If you need a chair, be aware of its location at all times, again to avoid tripping hazards. Wear powder-free nitrile gloves while handling the photos and fragile documents. Have a phone, camera, scanner, tablet, or other image capturing device at the ready and nearby. Traveling to a different room or area, even if it's only a few feet away, can increase the risk of damaging your material by introducing hazards such as tripping, dropping your item, or holding the fragile item for too long. Image capturing, specifically scanners. This section on scanners applies to home scanners and public self-use scanners, such as if you're using a scanner at a library. You'll want to check the glass surface as well as the lid of the scanner to make sure it's clean. If it's not, use a clean, dry soft cloth to remove any smudges or debris. Establish your preferred settings before you begin scanning. Choose the optimal setting that is practical for you. Although larger files are optimal for preservation perspective, they require more storage space and are more difficult to share than smaller files. So on the left column, we have some information about DPI. So resolution is the measure of sharpness or detail of an image. To prevent fuzzy or grainy images, have your scanner set to at least 300 dots per inch or DPI, but 600 is optimal. For larger items such as photos or documents that are larger than letter size, or if you plan to enlarge the image later on, scan at least 400 to 600 DPI. Again, while higher resolutions create a better quality and longer lasting file, it also means a larger file size, so keep this in mind when choosing your settings. Make sure that you select the appropriate document type during this stage. If you're scanning photos, make sure the photo setting is on. If you're scanning documents, make sure the document setting is on. However, if you're going back and forth between photos and documents, changing the setting can become cumbersome, so you can just stick with the photo setting. It's best to scan all material in color to ensure that you capture as much information from the photo as possible. For example, if I'm scanning a black and white or grayscale photo with the color setting on, it will ensure that I capture as many subtle color changes in the photo as possible. If I scan the same photo with the black and white setting, some of the different elements or subtle changes in color in the background may appear to be one solid object. If you cannot store large file sizes, try to save them at the largest file you possibly can. This is because smaller files degrade faster and lose details that larger files capture. Because of this, TIFF files, the largest file option, are the best because they capture 100% of image data. This means that the file will maintain all or most of its information every time it is accessed or shared. If you wish to edit or share an image saved as a TIFF, you can create a copy of it and save it as a JPEG or PDF to make it easier to share. While it's a great format to share digitized material with others, JPEGs are not optimal for master files. Because of its small file size, it can't capture 100% of an image's data, and data is lost every time the file is saved. One workaround is to create a backup set of JPEGs that you do not open unless you need to back them up onto a new storage device, or very sparingly create copies from them when your casual use copy fails. So, image capturing with cameras. This section covers digital, phone, and tablet camera settings. If you're a casual or novice camera user, the auto setting on whatever camera you use will work just fine. Excuse me. If you're a skilled amateur or an advanced camera user, using manual exposure is best so you can capture as much raw information as possible. And it will give you more to work with if you plan on doing color corrections or any such edits in post. For a more traditional digital camera, avoid using wide-angle lenses, as these can distort the image. However, if this is the only lens that you have access to, you may have to play around with your material and camera positioning and the lighting to avoid getting distorted images. For phones and other such cameras, avoid portrait mode, as this can leave out important background information or distort some of the aspects of the image. Also, avoid using flash if you can, as this can create shadows, uneven lighting, or overexpose your image. Also, try to capture the image in one shot instead of using rapid or burst photo modes. Having that many photos to go through can become quite the headache when it's time to organize your digital material. Instead, aim for one good photo, or take 2 or 3 shots to create a more manageable amount of photos to choose from. Now on to lighting, and this applies for cameras, phones, etc. If you're not using a scanner, the key to capturing a good image is lighting. Using 2 sources of light and placing them on either side of your workstation or at 45-degree angles, so that would be at the front corners of your table, will help illuminate your material, and it will illuminate it evenly. That, combined with positioning your camera parallel to the material, so directly over it, will also prevent shadows from being cast over your material and other parts of the image. If you do not have 2 lamps, you can play around with one, or reposition your workplace under an overhead light to achieve even lighting. Or if you have a window that gives great sunlight exposure during certain portions of the day, you can set up your workspace in that area. Just make sure that your material is not exposed to the sunlight or the lamps for long periods of time to prevent fading and other light-related damage. If your lighting creates glares on a glossy surface you're capturing, you can place your photo on a clean, neutral-colored, slip-resistant surface, such as a black or white pillowcase or sheet, or foam core board. That's the project board that some people use when they were in grade school. If you still have a glare, you can place this setup at a slight angle. If you place your material at an angle, you will still have to keep your camera parallel to the image to avoid an image that looks like it's been taken at an angle. Your photos and documents. Before we move on, I just want to pause and reiterate a few points that I made earlier about material handling and also talk about angles. Remember to handle photos with powder-free nitrile gloves as depicted here, and handle your photos around the edges with your fingertips. Avoid touching large portions of the surface of the photo to avoid smudges and damaging the material. If there's a glare on your material when taking a photo, you can slightly angle the image and cover whatever you're propping it on with that clean, non-slip, neutral-colored surface. If you have to lay your material at an angle, make sure your camera is poised 90 degrees parallel to the material to prevent capturing an image that seems uneven or distorted. So when photographing your material, always check the back of the photo or document to avoid missing any other information, even if you don't think there's something on the back. It's better to be safe than to possibly miss important information. To make your digitized material easy to organize, digitize your material in the order you assembled the physical material, digitize it in manageable groups, and upload and name your files when you are done with those groups. And again, more on naming in a moment. And I want to emphasize file types again. Beware of file types. We've discussed the benefits of TIFF files, and we've also discussed how to make JPEGs last when we don't have the means to store such large files as TIFFs. In that same vein, if you happen to save your files in another format we haven't discussed, make sure that your files are saved in a widely used format to avoid a situation where your file format becomes obsolete and can no longer be read on widely used software and devices. And now to those helpful but not necessary extras. If you don't have good lighting or two lamps you can move around to create proper lighting, you can also use clamp lights and clamp them at 45-degree angles, that's at the front corners of your workstation, to get the same effect. Because clamp lights often have swivel heads, you can maneuver them in a way that static lights can't be moved to get lighting that works best for your environment. And as long as you keep the cords out of the way, having them affixed to your workstation can help decrease tripping and toppling hazards. If you decide to get clamp lights, they don't have to be expensive. You can get them for anywhere between $6 to $12 at a place like Lowe's. Just make sure you use high wattage bulbs. If you still have trouble with overexposure, or if the surface you're photographing your material against is has uneven or non-neutral colors, say you're doing this on a purple table, you can use neutral colored foam core, flock paper, or cloth. If using foam core, and again, that's that project board that a lot of people use in grade school, use the matte side as opposed to the glossy side. Matte foam core, flock paper, and cloth will also create a non-slip surface to place your material on and will help dampen any harsh light and soften shadows. They will also make it easier for your camera to focus on the material that you're photographing. Another helpful but not necessary extra is a tripod. This may be especially helpful to you if you have difficulty keeping your hands steady or if you tire easily. If you use a tripod, try to aim for a more traditionally shaped tripod with an arm and a level to help counterbalance the weight of the camera, and make sure your camera is at the correct angle. When using a tripod, the light should come from the sides of your workstation as opposed to the corners, and this is to keep the tripod and tripod arm from casting shadows over your material. Also, when working with tripod arms and more traditional digital cameras, use a fixed lens to avoid your camera falling out of focus. And this is because refocusing your camera for every shot could become very tiresome and very time consuming. And we're on to our third section, preserving your digital collection. We'll go over this in a few steps. This will include naming and organizing your digital material. This will include metadata and backing up and migrating your collection and sharing and donating your collection. Some of this information may seem repetitive, but this is a case of same element, different context. And if you have a hard time following this section or need some notes to go back to, one of my colleagues suggested the Simco Guide to Digitization at Home, and the link will be in the comments section. So, naming and organizing. Now that you've organized your physical collection and you've taken your notes, it's time to upload the first batch of material you've digitized and name those files along with the folders they'll go in. So the image on the screen is not the file breakdown, but we'll get to what this is in just a second. So you'll create a folder and you'll label it with the name you choose, with the name you chose in the organization stage of this process. So say it's the Marks Family Collection. From there, you can decide if you want each individual file to have a unique name, or use the file numbers associated with your device, or a combination of both. So for example, here I chose in the 1990 section of my Marks Family Collection, Thanksgiving, 2019, and then the 001 is the file, the image number that my camera generated. From there, you can also name them one by one, or if your software allows it, you can batch name your files. To learn how to batch name your material, check the software or application website, for whatever image viewing software you're using. When naming a series of files where you've captured the front and back of the item, indicate that information in the file name. So for example, as we can see on screen, I have Thanksgiving underscore 2019 underscore 001 underscore R. And then below that, it's the same. Oops, sorry, there's a typo there. So for 002, there should be a V. R means recto and V means verso. So if you're not so archivally minded, you can use the words front and back, or F and B, or you can type out recto and verso to indicate the front and back of the image. When it comes to multi-page documents, you can indicate the page by putting page 1 or P1 or something along those lines, as long as it is easy to understand and keep track of. Keep your naming conventions consistent to make it easy to locate your material later on, and to make sure that it's easy to understand what you're looking at. Avoid using special symbols such as ampersands, tildes, and asterisks. If you must use symbols, stick with underscores and dashes. This is because file corruption can occur if the computer is unable to read a file, and this is often the case with files that have special characters in them. Metadata, or data about your data. This goes back to an as you work note from earlier in the presentation. If you took notes as you organized your physical collection, this step will be easy. In my case, I used this Excel file. You can either keep this document in the same folder as your collection, or add the information to the file in the software or application you use if it allows this. If you created handwritten notes, you can scan them and add them to the collections folder, but I suggest transcribing them into a Word doc or an Excel file, as this format will last longer and will have a smaller risk of getting lost or damaged. It will also be easier to search for information this way, as you could use a Control F function instead of trying to skim through paper notes. And again, avoid using special characters to prevent file corruption, which can happen if a computer can't read a file whenever each version of the file type is updated. And you may have seen this with Word docs from, Windows 2000 that get corrupted when Windows is updated to maybe Windows 2010. So backing up, to avoid catastrophes like data loss, back up your files in at least 2 places that are not your computer. If you store one copy of your material on one device and something unfortunate happens to that device, your files go with it. Also, say no to USB and thumb drives and other magnetic or optical media like CDs, floppy disks, and DVDs. The shelf life of these products is not great, and they do not do well with temperature and humidity fluctuations common to household storage areas. If you do have data saved on these items and want to keep them, store them in the environmental specifications discussed in our Genealogy Coffee Break episode, Preserving Your Family Photos and Documents. Backups can be saved through cloud services as well. When it comes to cloud storage, cloud systems generally check files as part of its annual checkups. And if one server fails, your material will be on a different one as a backup. Also, I cannot stress this enough. Pay attention to the fine print when signing up for cloud services. Double check if they back up files and verify the integrity of the files, also known as fixity. You'll also want to check their policies on content collection, as some services may harness your content to improve their services or for other uses. This information should be in their terms of service or their policies section. And of course, you can save your files on solid-state drives or traditional hard disk drives. As far as migration goes, solid state drives generally require more frequent checks and do not have as long of a lifespan as traditional hard disk drives. So you'll definitely want to check these at least once a year. You don't have to check every single file though. And in general, it's a good practice to migrate or copy your files to a new media every 3 to 5 years to escape technological obsolescence and file degradation. So for example, if you have files on a CD-ROM, it's a good idea to move them to a hard drive, as you can lose valuable data if you get, the tiniest scratch on your CD. And also, CD reading ports are becoming obsolete in computers and increasingly in desktops as well. And this is also the case with other optical and magnetic media. And sharing and donating. Here are a few options for sharing your collections with others once you have everything digitized and organized and preserved. You can share these things on USB or thumb drives, just do not make it the permanent storage solution. You can also send links from your cloud storage service to people. And for large files, as we stated a while back when talking about preserving JPEGs, you can generate a copy of that file by converting or saving the TIFF file as a JPEG, and that will make it into a more easily shareable format. If you would like to donate your material to an institution, the steps outlined in this entire process are all you need to prepare your digital collection for donation. However, you should still check with the institution you're donating to ensure that you followed all of their criteria. And this would also be a great time to have that list of metadata that we discussed, because that will be the inventory that you give to them so they know what they have. Right, so that's it for this episode. If you have any lingering questions, you can type them into the comment box now, and myself and my colleagues will stick around for a little while to answer any questions. If you come up with any questions later on, you can always email us at gi@cjh.org. If you're interested in email updates, you can do so by opening the tiny URL bit.ly/CJHE-news to receive information about other programs and news from the Center for Jewish History. And if you're able, please consider making a donation to the Center for Jewish History at cjh.org/donate now. Any amount helps. These donations enable us to make free programs like Genealogy Coffee Break available to everyone. Take care and join us again next Tuesday at 3:30 p.m. for another Genealogy Coffee Break.